Yes, welcome to our Are You Considering Retiring to Portugal webinar. It's time to start planning, and we are doing that with Paul Correa tonight from Fiduciary Wealth Management, who is here with us now. Good evening to you, Paul. How are you?
Good evening, Carl. Very well, thank you. Looking forward to the webinar.
Excellent. And where do we find you tonight?
In the office. In the office in Gibraltar. I was working from home, but I thought it would be quieter in the office rather than from home. So yeah.
So over there in Gibraltar. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So by way of an introduction, I think we've got a rather nice little video to play, haven't we, first of all, before we really get into the questions?
Absolutely.
I will roll that now in that case.
Fiduciary Wealth helps clients achieve the financial goals of creating, protecting and transferring wealth to the next generation. Traditionally, our focus has been on serving the wealthy expat retiree market, so people who have moved to another country in search of a better quality of life. More recently, we've turned our attention to internationally mobile senior executives who are on excellent remuneration packages and been building up considerable wealth during their working lives. We also provide services to entrepreneurs, wealthy individuals with global business interests where the issues of residency, domicile and location of wealth generation may cause cross-border conflicts. The most important thing is to engage in a broader dialogue to develop deeper relationships and provide more complete solutions. Essentially, it's all about solving client problems in a more intelligent way. Clients value our advice because it is objective, it's impartial and it's tailored to support their financial goals. Gibraltar is in a very favourable position with continued access to the UK financial services marketplace post-Brexit. The global drive for tax transparency has also increased the demand for tax-led wealth management advisory services. Fiduciary Wealth is quite different to most practices in that we are closely associated to Isolas, which is Gibraltar's longest-standing Band 1 law firm, and we are also members of MGI Worldwide, a top 20 ranked global accountancy network. It's really positive for our practice to have these professional connections. We are based in the heart of Gibraltar in a historic building that dates back to the middle of the 15th century. We benefit from a central location, providing easy access to visitors and walk-in clients and allowing us to be part of a bustling community.
So there you go. Thank you for that, Paul. An excellent introduction there to FWM and the work that you do. Your specialism, of course, is in UK pension transfers and, of course, retirement planning more generally. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Ultimately, it's all about embedding value, and it's very difficult for us to distinguish between where retirement planning starts and tax planning ends. And then there's cross-border financial planning and wealth management advice, because everything gets thrown in the mix, yeah, so to speak. So when we deal with clients, we give holistic advice. But yes, retirement planning forms a key area of business for us. Absolutely.
And part of that specialism is in UK pension transfers, right? That's a really important part of your business.
It is, because our clients are not exclusively, but predominantly they are British or English speaking clients. And most of them have had a connection to the UK of some sort. So they might have accumulated some pension benefits over a period of time, and they're looking to transfer those across.
Okay, and I'm going through a number of notes and questions here because there are a lot of technicalities and legislation around this. And I think it's important to get the kind of ground rules and ground information right, if you like. So bear with me while I do that, and do bring your questions in through the chat, please. And as Jerry said, let us know where you are in the world. So what are the advantages, Paul, of transferring UK pensions?
Do you want me to explain a bit about QROPS first, or?
Well, yes, those interesting acronyms and abbreviations. I'm sure that comes into it. So yeah. as you wish, you're the expert. You tell me when you need to talk about those.
Well, firstly, let me explain the concept of QROPS. I mean, clients who have formally left the UK or plan to do so within the next 12 months can effectively transfer their UK pension benefits into an offshore pension arrangement, which stands for QROPS, and the acronym stands for Qualifying Recognized UK Pension Schemes. That came about following legislation in the UK in April 2006, which gave birth to overseas pensions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now there's two types of pensions. There's one, in the UK, you've got SIPs, which is self-invested personal pensions. You've got personal pension plans, and then we've got QROPS, which is relevant to expatriates who have left British shores and wish to transfer the benefits across. Now, you asked me what is the advantage and the benefit of transferring a UK pension. That depends very much on the client's personal circumstances.
Right.
No one case is the same. And it depends on whether they're transferring a defined benefit scheme or a defined contribution scheme. Now, let me explain first the advantages of a UK pension transfer into QROPS, and then I'll go back and explain what a DBS scheme is as opposed to a DCS, yeah?
Yes, please.
Because, yeah, it all gets technical. So
Yeah.
there's 5 or 6 advantages to transferring your UK pension into a QROPS. The first one is that you escape the UK lifetime allowance limit, which currently stands at 1,073,100. So that is the limit. This effectively limits the amount of pension benefits you can build up over your lifetime. If you exceed that allowance limit, then you pay a tax charge on any excess, which depends on whether you draw it as pension income. So if you draw it as pension income, the surcharge is 25%. If you decide to withdraw it as a lump sum withdrawal, then the tax charge is 55%. So the lifetime allowance limit is really, restricts and limits how much you can grow your pension pot to. You can grow it and exceed that lifetime allowance limit, but then potentially you could be liable to UK taxation on any excess.
Okay.
Now, the beauty of QROPS is that once you transfer your pension benefits across, there's no ceiling. So effectively, it doesn't matter anymore. So you've accumulated your UK pensions, you transfer them across, and it doesn't matter if they continue growing to whatever value, because within a QROPS, you're not restricted to UK legislation, which has that ceiling. So I think that's one very good advantage of QROPS. The second one is that you can consolidate various pension schemes and pots into one. So it's easier to manage and less expensive because you haven't got different layers of costs in every individual scheme. And you have much better oversight of the total value of your pension assets, right? One place, one layer of costs, everything is managed more carefully. The third advantage is that you have no currency, you have currency freedom. So therefore you no longer need to maintain your pension assets in pound sterling. Clearly, it doesn't make any sense if you have left British shores to move to Portugal, that you are constrained and restricted in terms of how your pension assets are denominated, right?
Yeah.
So if you move to Portugal and keep your UK pension benefits in sterling, you are susceptible to the effects of currency rate movements between sterling and euro. So if those currency movements are working against you, then the value of your pension that you're drawing down could be diminished by the currency effect, right? So ideally what you want to do is to transfer it into a scheme where you can hold your assets not just in sterling, but have maybe a mix of currencies, including euros, because that's how you draw down your pension.
Okay.
So you've got currency freedom. That's number 3. 4, you're able to take advantage of a much lower rate of taxation on pension income than in the UK. I mean, in the UK, the amount of tax you pay is based on your marginal rate of tax, no different to how it is in Portugal. But in Portugal, with annuities and so on, they're taxed very, very efficiently. So you can make quite considerable tax savings from transferring your pension across when it comes to taxation on pension income, right? So if you're getting a pension of 50,000 and in the UK you're paying, for argument's sake, 15 grand, your net disposable income from that pension source is £35,000, right? But if in Portugal you're only paying 5 or 10%, then your money stretches more. So that's another big advantage.
Okay.
The fifth one is you can easily pass on the accumulated pension benefits to your beneficiaries, because when you set up your QROPS scheme, you're required to nominate beneficiaries.
Mm-hmm.
So if you snuff it, it passes on seamlessly to your next of kin, right? No problem. Not that you care much once you've snuffed it, but hey, it's happening in the background seamlessly, right?
Yes, you've made good provision.
You've made good provision for your children or your surviving spouse.
Mm-hmm.
There's a sixth advantage, but I think I'll cover that further down the line. Yeah, in one of the following questions, I'll touch on a sixth one, which I think is sometimes overlooked, but could be crucial as well in determining whether you keep your UK pensions in the UK or you transfer them across. I always believe that you should have your pensions in the country and they should be tax efficient in the country where you live.
Okay.
Having a UK pension and living in another country is not the most tax efficient way of structuring your financial affairs.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, when you started talking there, and we will be going into the distinction between DBS and DCS, but you mentioned a time limit, I think, which will obviously be very important to people watching. Is that right?
For what? For
setting up a QROPS. Did you say a few months?
A bit further down, I'll cover that point. Yes, you're right.
That worried me a little bit, but let's come back to that later then.
Yes, it is potentially an issue should the UK decide that post-Brexit they want to tighten things up. And it's something I want to touch on, but you're absolutely right. There's a small window of opportunity in case the UK government decides to tighten things up a bit.
And we can be ahead of that if we plan.
You can be ahead of the game, yeah.
Very good. And talking of the government, the UK government, there was some people may have got wind of how there was pressure from the UK pension industry regards the government trying to stop the QROPS plan idea.
Yes, no, what it is, and I can cover it now. What it is in March 2017, the UK government imposed a 25% overseas transfer charge, another surcharge, yeah, on pension transfers overseas, predominantly because they came under pressure from the UK pension industry, because there was a hemorrhaging of pension assets from the UK, because Brits typically want to leave the UK and they go to warmer climes, right? Like Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Greece, and so forth and so on. So they applied this tax charge to try and prevent further funds from leaving the UK. Mm-hmm. Now, they didn't extend that ban to the EU. So they applied it to countries outside the EU. And there's a reason why. Firstly, Britain was still, in March 2017, notwithstanding the UK referendum, they were still part of the EU, right? And there's the 4 freedoms, right? One of them is freedom of capital. So the UK was not at liberty to prevent UK pension transfers leaving the UK to Portugal or some other country, right? They would have been in breach of one of the freedoms, the freedom of the free movement of capital.
Yes, indeed.
So, so they applied the OTC charge, the overseas transfer charge, across, non-EU countries. So that really stopped pension assets leaving the UK, mm-hmm. but the EU was left off the hook for now. Now, the question is, what are they going to do now that things are so, I know from personal experiences that supplies are not getting through from Calais to Gibraltar for Waitrose products. So notwithstanding that they did a trade deal, it's not very smooth, and I think they're trying to slap us on the wrist for leaving the EU. So they're making it difficult. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking purely about supermarkets, right? So the UK might well retaliate further down the line and say, okay, this overseas transfer charge, actually, now we're not bound by the 4 freedoms. Yeah. And in fact, we haven't got access to the single market anyway. So what we're going to do, we're going to tax the EU as well, any pension transfers to the EU. So people have to be mindful that could happen. Okay. And once that occurs, then it's no longer viable to transfer your UK pension across, because you're losing 25% of its value on transfer.
Okay, so that's something
Now,
to be very mindful of.
to be mindful. Now, there's an exception to that rule, and the exception to that rule is a bit difficult to explain, but essentially what it is, they give another exemption. Now, if you transfer your UK pension into a Portuguese QROPS, where the QROPS trustees and administrators are in Portugal,
Yeah.
then they would be exempt. But the reality is that QROPS trustees and administrators are found in offshore jurisdictions. So they're found in Malta, they're found in Luxembourg, Isle of Man, Gibraltar, Jersey, Guernsey. They're not going to be found in Portugal. They're not going to be found in Nigeria or Ghana, where I trip regularly.
Okay.
So it's an exemption, but it's not really an exemption, because you can't really, you don't find trustees in those countries.
Okay. All right. At this point, I need to ask you, Paul. I mean, there is a focus here on UK pension holders, owners, and people are already asking, you know, what about Switzerland? What about the US? A lot of our community here are from the United States. How do you deal with those people from other countries?
Well, I mean, that's a really good point, and I think, you know, in terms for the purpose of this webinar, I'm covering mainly UK pension transfers, but I'm happy to engage with individuals on a one-to-one thereafter to understand the complexities and the issues they have, to see whether we can help them.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, for those US nationals tuning in, you'll know that dealing with US nationals is quite difficult.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible. It's not impossible. And let me say one other thing, that further down in, in the last 20 minutes of the presentation, there'll be a US curveball, because we're going to talk about the dollar and so on. So yeah, hopefully that will interest some of the our friends, American friends who've tuned in tonight.
Okay, so yeah, stay tuned if you're not from the UK for those more general principles. And as Paul says there, make direct contact, and you can find Paul's details in our business directory. So back to these technicalities and distinctions, Paul, you were going to talk about direct benefit schemes and defined contribution schemes.
Yeah.
Right? Should we go into that longer?
Exactly. It's very simple. Right. A defined contribution scheme is one where the value of the pension fund is dependent on the market value of your investments. Mm-hmm. So you set up a pension and you've got underlying investments within them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then depending on how your investments perform, that will determine what the value of your pension fund is. So that's a defined contribution. With a defined benefit, you received a guaranteed pension benefit for life. Potentially, it could be inflation linked, so it increases with inflation, but the actual pension benefit is guaranteed. And this is determined by a formula which is based on the number of years of service to the company, mm-hmm. Your earnings history, particularly the last 3 years of employment, and your age. And those 3 factors will determine how much your guaranteed pension will be on retirement. Okay. So with defined contributions, you are in the hands of the gods, depending on the performance of your pension assets. With a defined benefit contribution, you've got the certainty that you'll receive certain pension benefits on retirement date and thereon.
Does that mean, does that mean that's the better one?
That is the better one, but everything, there's all pros and cons with everything. And let me explain.
I thought you might say that.
Exactly. We want to make this interesting, right? Otherwise it'd be boring. They'll all go home. Everyone will. So that's how it is. And I said before that there were 5 advantages to QROPS, but I would mention one 6th one, which I think is really, really important.
Okay.
A key benefit of QROPS, and this only applies to defined benefit schemes, the ones where your pension benefit is guaranteed, your pension salary, let's call it, yeah? The pension that you can draw down every year is guaranteed. And that is a very clear benefit, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So with a defined benefit scheme, even though you get a guaranteed pension benefit every year, which can be inflation linked, so it goes up, yeah? The residual value of your pension fund, sorry, and I'll repeat that. With the QROPS, with a defined benefit scheme, if you pass away, right, then your spouse will get 50% of your pension. It depends on the terms of that pension arrangement, but typically your spouse gets 50% of your pension. So you say, oh, it's a brilliant, guaranteed pension scheme of 60 grand. And then you snuff it 1 year later, and then your wife gets 30,000. That's how it works. And then if your wife then passes away, she's run by a, double-decker red bus in London, right? Then your children get absolutely nothing. That's it. The pension pot has been lost completely.
That's a savage blow, isn't it?
That is a savage blow. And that is one of the negatives of a defined benefit scheme. Now, with the QROPS, it's different. With the QROPS, you've got a pension pot. So you effectively be converting a defined benefit scheme into a defined contribution, because you'll get a value, and then you draw a pension, and then if you pass away, your wife continues drawing so long as the pension fund has some value.
Yeah.
And if you both pass away and there's still some residual value, you pass it on to your children.
Okay.
So that is, I would say, a major advantage of having a QROPS as opposed to a defined benefit scheme. And if you're single and you pass away, but you may have been married, previously married, you're divorced now, you pass away, and then your children get nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's no spouse who benefits from half the pension. So those are, I think that has to be always borne in mind when you have a defined benefit scheme, that you actually protect those assets by transferring them into a QROPS scheme.
All right, excellent. So to another abbreviation, the cash equivalent transfer values, the CETVs. Pay attention, everybody. We will be testing you at the end with these, but I think it's great to sort of deep dive into all these technicalities and alert people to what's the detail of this, Paul. So yes,
I'll sorry, just to clarify one point. Sure. With defined benefit schemes, the UK Financial Conduct Authority, the regulator, has clamped down quite significantly. Okay. So it's not that easy to transfer your defined benefit scheme. In fact, they are trying to outlaw transfers from defined benefit schemes to QROPS. And one of the requirements is that you seek an independent pension transfer analyst to produce a report. So let's say that someone comes to me, can we transfer from the defined benefit? The first port of call is that we have to get an independent analyst to evaluate. Now, the outcome of that report will always be negative, because I'll tell you why. This is really strange, a bit quirky. The reason is because professional indemnity insurers won't provide any indemnity cover for a defined benefit scheme. So the professional says, oh yes, it's tax up, you should do it. Yeah. You have no cover. So when you go to the analyst, even if it's clear that this is to your benefit, the report will still say it isn't. Yeah. Okay. It's one of those things. Now, this is where it can become potentially tricky, as no one is prepared to advise, right? So we enter the murky world of insistent client demanding a pension transfer, and the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK has very prescriptive rules of how to do this. So, the insistent client has to write in his own words, right? I can't draft a letter and he signs it, explaining why he or she thinks that this is for their benefit. Mm-hmm. But they've taken a tough line, and rightly so, because of past abuses. Let me be very clear. There's been pension scamming, perhaps not so much in Portugal, but certainly in Spain. There's been bad advice, which wasn't in the consumer's best interest, and the regulator had no choice but to clamp down. Now, I think, this is my personal opinion, I hope there's no regulators tuning in this evening, but it's a sledgehammer approach to crack a nut, right? Yeah. Because even though the industry has brought this on itself, and allowing rogue advisors to behave unethically, I think making it difficult for an individual to transfer their pension benefit, defined benefit scheme across when it's clearly in their interest, I think is a disservice to the client. So I think it's one of those things that over time I can see UK regulators tightening even further.
Oh, really? Okay.
So you asked me about cash equivalent transfer values.
I did.
Okay, another acronym.
Yes.
For those of you who like the acronyms, let's call it CETV, cash equivalent transfer values. Now, these applies only for defined benefit scheme transfers to QROPS. And the difficulty is because a defined benefit scheme provides a guaranteed future pension benefit, right? I think I mentioned before, it's based on your years of service, your age, and your earnings history for the last 3 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that determines what your pension benefit will be on retirement. Now, because we have to convert a pension benefit into a cash sum with defined contribution scheme, it's easy. What is the value of my pension assets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every day it has a value depending on market movements. With this, it's a bit different. So you need to calculate your pension benefits, and then there will be a cash equivalent transfer value, which is determined by pension scheme actuaries in the UK. Now, how do you arrive at a cash equivalent transfer value?
How do they do that?
How do they do that? How on earth do they do that? Let me explain very clearly and succinctly. Essentially, actuaries work on the basis of the UK gilt yield, which is the 10-year UK bond, government bond. And that will determine, there will be a factor that is one of the things that is factored in, and that will determine, what the cash equivalent transfer value is. Now, as UK gilt yields are very down, they are almost zero rate, like we are everywhere globally, right? We have a naturally and artificially low interest rates globally, zero interest rates, right? So the gilt yield is producing potentially even a negative yield or a marginal yield, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interest rate yields and UK gilts yields and prices move conversely. There's an inverse relationship. When gilt yields are at its lowest, that conversion factor for transfer values are at its highest. So I transferred, annoyingly, my pension, and it was a defined benefit scheme in 2011, and the conversion factor was 8. Let me tell you, those conversion factors are now between 40 and 50. I've seen them. And it means that you're getting exceptionally high transfer values. And that's why this is the 7th point, why I say that trying to outlaw and ban UK pension transfer, or rather defined benefit scheme transfers into QROPS, is a disservice to the underlying client, to the pensioner, right?
Okay.
And let me explain one thing. If you start using discounted cash flow analysis to determine whether a guaranteed pension is better than your transfer value or not, I'll try and give you a very simple example. Let's say that you're guaranteed a pension benefit of 20,000, a guaranteed pension of £20,000 when you reach retirement age at 65, right? And you're 60 now, let's say. And you call me and say, can you get me a cash equivalent transfer value for my defined benefit scheme in the UK? And I go, and because those conversion factors are 40 and 50, they come back, and to your great surprise, they say, you know what? The transfer value would be 1 million quid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 1 million quid, you're 60 now, right? Think about this. I'm not going to go into the technicalities of discounted cash flows, but keeping it simple. If you divide 20,000 by 1 million, that's a factor of 50, right? And you're 60 now. Let's assume that there's no growth in your pension assets and that you keep it in cash at 0 interest rate and draw 20,000 every year. You would have to live until 110, right?
Okay, yes.
So you start weighing the pros and cons, and you go, you know what? This is a no-brainer.
Yes.
Actually, it does benefit me to transfer my pension at this point in time because of those high uh, transfer values, and they are the historical highs. So the last 5, 6, 7 years since the global financial crisis, those conversion factors have been at their highest.
Right.
So, someone comes and gets a cash transfer value from the defined benefit scheme. Most of them are incredibly pleased with with the figures that they get.
Okay. On that matter of investments, I am going to be asking you for your top 3 investment predictions at the end. Okay. So stay tuned for that,
Fine.
everybody.
Oh,
Um,
that's the
yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot there. But until then, we're in the detail at the moment, and we have some kind of case study questions as well. Thank you for that, Jerry. So we'll come back to those. But yeah, I think we need to work our way through these technicalities. You are talking about transferring then, and is it possible to do that after you've left your country of residence? That might be a question on some people's minds. Is there a drawbridge effect, or can you do it sort of retrospectively or
well.
geographically?
No. You can do it at any point in time. If
Okay.
you haven't left the UK and you've moved to Portugal, but you're not tax resident, you have a window of 12 months.
Okay.
Otherwise, but you have to transfer it once you become Portuguese tax resident within that 12 month window. But once you're in Portugal and a tax resident in Portugal, you can decide when to transfer your pension assets across. There's no reason why you can't.
I'm sure that's coming as
But
useful information to some people. Yeah. Sorry.
but no, the one thing I would mention with regards, and now this is where we move to something else. Another thing you can do as a not necessarily as a Brit. You don't have to be a Brit, but if you're British or someone who's lived in the UK and accumulated pension and decided to move to Portugal, and they've got some non-UK pension assets, they can establish what we call a QNUPS, which is a qualifying non-UK pension scheme, which is funded from non-UK pension assets. And this, it was a tweak to the QROPS legislation, which came into effect in 2006. They tweaked it in 2010, in February 2010, and it gave birth to QNUPS. Now, with QNUPS, you can draw pension income in the same tax efficient manner as you do with QROPS. I think the great advantage of the QNUPS is that if you establish it after you left the UK, is that those pension assets are immediately moved from your estate for UK IHT purposes. Don't fall into the trap of thinking, for those Brits tuning in today, that you're no longer liable to UK inheritance tax once you leave British shores. And since there's no IHT in Portugal either for non-Portuguese cited assets, that you're fine. Because the fact is you're not. It's important to remember that that UK IHT is based on the concept of domicile rather than on tax residency. And domicile is not something you can easily shed. So if the value of your estate exceeds the allowance, then you have a liability there that you want to protect. Now, once you're an expert, it does open the opportunities for you to restructure your financial affairs to provide some protection against that liability.
Okay.
And this is where QNUPS can be very, very interested. Now, I'd like to say that QNUPS is first and foremost a retirement benefit scheme. Therefore, any contributions from non-pension assets that you want to make into the scheme, you've got $1 million in a bank account and you're thinking, you know what, I want to reduce my UK IHT liability. So I'm going to stick in some money into my QNUPS. We have to remember that it is a retirement benefit scheme first and foremost. Now, you can take advantage of the opportunity, but clearly, when you set up that scheme, any contributions that you put in must be proportionate both to an individual's overall wealth and what is required to provide them with a retirement benefit.
Okay.
So it has to be proportional, but it does open the door for you to put some money into your QNUPS, and then you're removing those from your UK estate. So you have to do it by the book, because you don't want HMRC then to question the legitimacy of the pension arrangement and to challenge it. But it does give you the opportunity to be to restructure your affairs with a UK IHT perspective in mind.
Okay, and for clarity, IHT stands for
Inheritance tax.
okay, inheritance tax. Good. Just a question coming in at that point. David says, my take on this is that QROPS is more beneficial for UK DB schemes, but has only marginal benefits, if any, for UK DC schemes. Do you agree, Paul, with that comment?
Well, clearly, from what we've spoken today, with a defined benefit scheme, there are added benefits of transferring across. But I would say that if I was a UK national with UK pension benefits, I would transfer everything across.
Okay.
Consolidation, you've got, lower rates of taxation. So David is right insofar as there's certain advantages of transferring a defined benefit scheme, which doesn't extend to defined contribution.
Yeah.
But whether it's a defined contribution or defined benefit, generally speaking, it's advantageous to have everything consolidated within a QROPS arrangement. So he's right, but I don't think you can rule out defined contributions because you don't have the benefits.
Yeah, and
All the benefits, yeah.
Yeah, and every case is unique and individual.
Every case is absolutely unique. You have to really look at the nuts and bolts and determine whether it's viable or not.
All right. Thank you for that, Paul. Thank you, David, for the question. Can I ask you about tax-free lump sums from the UK specifically, and pensions? Are these taxable again in Portugal, for example?
Well, the thing is, in countries like Spain and Portugal, there's no such thing as tax-free cash lump sum, and Brits, migrate to Portugal and Spain and warmer climes, and they think that the UK legislation travels with them. But the reality, it doesn't. And what they should do is really take the tax-free lump sum while they're still UK tax resident.
Yeah.
Take it then.
Yes.
Because once you're a Portuguese tax resident, you'll have some kind of liability to that.
Yes, at least 10%. Certainly on normal pension incomes, it's 10% now, isn't it? Where it was free previously. Wow. Okay. Anything we've missed, Paul? Sorry.
Yeah. There's talking about non-UK nationals, and I have some South Africans. We are seeing quite a big number of South Africans that are looking to Portugal as their country of residency. They seem to be attracted by Portugal because it has its similarities in terms of weather and quality of life and so on.
Sure.
So a QNUPS arrangement or a pension trust arrangement can also benefit a non-UK national. We're not talking about QROPS, just about QNUPS, because you can shelter assets from potential creditors and you can draw pension income as a temporary annuity in a very tax efficient manner.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you've established your residency in Portugal under the non-habitual residency regime, another acronym, NHR, then the tax that you pay on short-term annuities is as low as 1.5%.
Okay.
So no, there's clear benefits of establishing a QNUPS arrangement or a similar pension trust arrangement for non-UK nationals.
Okay, because we did get a very specific question from you, George. Thank you for that. I think that's a very specific one that perhaps should be referred to Paul direct. And Elise has put the contact email in there. But generally speaking, then you are, the NHR is part of your expertise mix.
Well, yes and no. I mean,
okay.
I'm not going to profess to be an expert on NHR. I'm an expert on Gibraltar residency.
Okay.
But as part of our tax planning, we do non-habitual residency regimes.
Yeah.
We do it with collaborating with one of the collaborators from Expats in Portugal, and that's Gilda Pereira.
Gilda Pereira, yeah, a great
Emigrante.
Yeah.
And she's the go-to expert,
Okay.
And she's brilliant. So we tend to work hand in glove with Gilda on that one.
Oh, that's great to know. Fantastic. Okay.
And she's a great professional. So she's in, people will be in great hands for sure.
She has a lot of fans here. I know that, Paul, and she's an occasional guest on our webinars and very popular too. So anything else that may have cropped up for you while we're talking there that is a must include?
No, I think we've covered enough ground there
Okay.
I know for people who are not in the industry, so many acronyms and so much technical stuff,
Yes.
you know, apart from being extremely boring, you know, but I can see that some of the listeners understand how this works. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think some might be favouring to open a bottle of wine quite soon, and
to numb the brain, or
well, no, to help process. I was going to put it differently, Paul. Maybe to process the information, to help with that. But I did say, didn't I? I was going to ask you about your 3 investment predictions for 2021, and I think we should underline the word predictions, right? Because it's not advice, but just your view as somebody in the industry.
Well, I haven't got a crystal ball, and there's so many imponderables in this market. I've never, in my over 30 years trading the market, I've never seen a market which is more rigged than this one. And
Okay.
I say this, and I don't offer any apologies for saying, because it's completely rigged. It's a market that is rigged by the big banks and by governments with all this quantitative easing and printing of money. But leaving that aside,
Well, I was going to ask you. I mean, that is a powerful word to use.
yeah, but it's true. It's
Okay.
completely rigged,
Fair
in
play.
my opinion, and it's rigged, and we have artificial low interest rates and money printing, and the governments are buying their own paper in the marketplace to avoid it's just absolutely crazy. But my 3 bold predictions for 2021.
Come on.
I expect the precious metals, particularly gold and silver, to outperform all the other asset classes. In times of economic uncertainty, gold and silver provides a safe haven status, and then you've got the risk of reflation. So it's a hedge against inflation too. I think the gold miners trade at a significant discount to physical gold paper, and are also a very good opportunity. Let me explain the reasons, and this might interest the US listeners, why I think gold will do well.
Yeah.
The amount of liquidity that has been injected into the monetary system to prevent the economy from collapsing. I think budget deficits have skyrocketed to its highest level since World War II. We expect deficits to widen further and to reach record highs, and we see loose monetary conditions as being a major catalyst for gold buying. So that's one reason. Secondly, the injecting of massive liquidity into the financial system weighs heavily on the greenback, on the US dollar. The US dollar index has already lost 11% of its value in 2020 relative to a basket of foreign currencies. And we see that continuing over the next year or two, because the US has twin deficits, a balance of payments trade deficit and a budget deficit. And those two things tend to weigh on the currency. So my prediction is that the US dollar will lose over the next 2 years another 10-20% of its value relative to this basket of foreign currencies. Third, history tells us that every time we've seen a weakening of the dollar, it's always been positive for gold. So we go back to the 1970s, the gold price increased 20-fold, 2,000%, during a period in which the dollar lost 30% of its value. And more recently, in the 2000s, just before, up to the global financial crisis, the dollar lost 40% of its value, and gold increased 6 times in value. So there's already precedence there, and historically you see that gold will perform well in at times when the dollar is losing its value. The other thing to bear in mind is that we have $31 trillion of government paper, fixed income assets, which are producing a negative yield.
Yes.
Negative yield, right? So you're holding assets, government paper, and you're not getting anything, because if you take away the inflation rate from the yield, actually you're losing money holding the paper, right? Wouldn't it make sense then to hold gold, which doesn't provide a yield, but doesn't give you a return unless it appreciates in value, but doesn't produce a negative yield, right? So I think it provides a great hedge against inflation, where we might see some reflation further down the line. And then the other thing, fifth and sixth. Fifth, we are seeing negative real rates across the entire US yield curve, but not the 30-year Treasury bond. Now, at the long end of the curve, every time that the 30-year Treasury bond has yielded a negative return, and it's happened on a couple of occasions in the last 50 years, a powerful bull market in gold has ensued. And if you look at the yield curve, at the top end of the curve, we're still positive yielding, right? Should that go into negative, that could be a major catalyst for gold. And then sixth, and I think the most important, is that due to the growing mountain of debt, there might be a global financial reset. So central banks of leading economies have been building up their gold reserves in the last few years, in light of the fact that we're seeing a debasement of the fiat, the so-called fiat currencies.
Indeed,
So
yeah.
they're building the gold reserves. Now, the interesting thing is, one way out of the crisis is what we call the global reset, right? If the price of gold, if they're building up their gold reserves and the price of gold were to increase 5-6-fold, then the value of those reserves would soar, would increase significantly.
Yeah.
And maybe part of that could be used to repay the debt.
Yeah.
So I think positioning yourself in gold at this point in time sounds very, very smart. And of course, silver always follows suit. Silver is much more volatile, but normally trades historically 60 ounces of silver for 1 ounce of gold.
Okay.
And, you know, if gold goes to 3,000, then you expect to see silver trading at $50 an ounce, and it's trading now at 19. So you can see how much upside it has. And then I mentioned the gold miners. Why do the gold miners offer great potential? The case for investing in gold miners relative to gold has never been better. The gold producers are delivering record earnings, and that's because extracting gold from the mines has never been more profitable because the price of gold has gone up, right?
Yeah.
They've been paying back their debts, so they're reducing costs and debts, so they're cash flow positive, and they've been increasing dividends. So if you look at the price of gold miners relative to the gold price, it's at an all-time high. So potentially it could go up 150% from these levels. So gold, silver, and gold miners have excellent long-term potential. Now, my second prediction, and not diverging too much from metals, but this is moving from precious metals to industrial metals. I think we're entering a new bullish super cycle in industrial metals, such as copper, palladium, and nickel.
Yep.
And there's a few reasons. Firstly, investments in infrastructure. We've seen China with a massive infrastructure spending program, which started last year, which is why China has been the only one of the few economies that has posted positive growth in 2020. The economy grew 2.3, but that's why they went into infrastructure spending. And now we're seeing the Biden administration sanctioning a 1.9 trillion, I think it is, infrastructure spending program. So infrastructure consumes a lot of industrial metals, right? So this is why industrial metals will be in demand, because they are they consume a lot of copper and iron ore and all those base metals. And the other thing, and the other good thing going for industrial metals is electrical vehicles.
Oh yes, of course.
You know, are coming in 2030.
Yep.
The fact that the need for renewable energy production and battery storage. So commodities have always been more cyclical than other asset classes, and they go through these cycles over periods of time. And if you look at the CRB commodity index graph, you know, you can see how volatile they are. The commodity index increased 400% during the period 99 to 2008 during the global financial crisis, but then has lost subsequently in the last 12 years 80% of its value. So it's gone back to pre-2010 levels. So amazing opportunities in industrial metals. I mean, our clients are invested in nickel, invested in copper in particular, and in palladium. And look at the electrical vehicle market. I think we are at an inflection point. Look at most prospective buyers. They want the next car to be electric. So there's going to be an explosive demand for base metals due to energy storage requirements. Copper offers amazing opportunities, but if you look, I've got all my graphs here, and I don't want to go through them because, you know, I can be here for the next hour. But the Bloomberg New Energy Finance, according to Bloomberg, New Energy Finance says that nickel demand for electrical vehicles is expected to explode 14-fold up to 2030.
Amazing.
But if you look at the demand and projection for base metals, nickel, aluminium, phosphorus, iron, copper, even graphite and lithium.
Lithium. Sure.
Unless I extend cobalt because it's losing its you know, its appeal as part of the new batteries for electrical vehicles. The need for cobalt has decreased. They've found substitutes. So cobalt and manganese is less in demand, but all the other base metals, we are talking about, you know, 10-fold increase over the next 10 years.
Amazing.
I'll give you an example. You know, for a typical electrical vehicle, you need 120 pounds of graphite. And significant quantities of nickel, cobalt, and lithium. The average solar project requires about 5 times as much copper per megawatt of capacity as a conventional fossil fuel. Offshore wind farms demand about 10 times as much. So I think we're in a boom in electrical vehicles, renewables, and energy storage, and that will propel all those base metals. I can see copper, nickel, and palladium increasing 10-fold over the next 9 years.
Amazing, Paul. I'd not heard of palladium. I thought it was a building rather than a precious.
No.
Okay.
And my last prediction.
Yes, number 3.
Clean energy and solar power in particular. I think they will produce the best returns. The world has been relying on dirty fuel to produce electricity for over a century.
Yeah.
And although it's relatively cheap, it's a heavy pollutant, and everyone recognizes that.
Yes.
But you know, according to JP Morgan, the global demand for battery energy storage, I go back to battery energy storage, is expected to increase 100-fold from now to 2030. Now, look at solar powered energy production. Today, it accounts for 7% of global power production. Solar power, 7%. By 2030, the International Energy Agency expects that to increase 5-fold to 38% of global power production. By 2040, it's 66%.
Wow. And that need has to be met, right?
That need has to be met. And so there's going to be global demand. Now, my 5 reasons why solar power companies will perform extremely well over the next 10 years. First, the cost of solar power will be lower than oil for the first time by 2025. Right now, it continues to be more expensive. And so long as it's more expensive, we have this addiction to oil. As soon as it becomes cheaper, we'll go to cheaper alternative sources, which is solar, right?
Yes.
And we're getting close now. We're 4 years away. Secondly, the European Green Deal aims to have 0 net emissions by 2050. So there's going to be increased reliance on solar power. So this requires a doubling of power generation from renewable sources by 2030. President Joe Biden is already passing a clean energy bill and increasing solar subsidies, and that's worth 2 trillion. So that's going to catapult the demand for solar power in the US alone. And the US clearly is a leader for the global economy. There's growing interest in sustainable energy from big investment houses globally. So more capital will flow into solar and wind power. The big investment houses will set up investment funds and more money will flow into that. That will be a major investment trend. Keep the money flowing, developing the technology, but producing these amazing returns. So I think we are in the cusp of an energy revolution. And I think solar provides a massive investment opportunity for long-term investors who can stay the course and who accept the volatile nature of the sector. But, you know, for me, 2021 and beyond is about, and I think we're in this super cycle, it's about silver and gold, because I think we will, you know, this debt is unsustainable. I see the industrial metals that I mentioned now, and I see solar power as being a big investment theme, and one where investors can make a lot of money if they're patient.
Thank you for being so bold there, Paul. That was very interesting indeed. I'm sure of great interest to our audience here.
I'm sure that someone will hold me to account in 12 months.
That's your job. That's your job, mate, isn't it?
And you've taped it, Carl.
Yes, absolutely.
I hope you never play that again.
It's going to be on the on the internet, you know, for eternity, as I told you before. So,
Thank you.
But you know, intuitively, it sounds right. I know you shouldn't use that as an investment tool alone, but it makes a lot of sense what you've said tonight, and I'm sure it has to other people here. I know we need to let you go because you have to meet your team have to meet their own curfew restrictions.
Absolutely, we have half an hour to get home.
We don't want to get you into trouble. I say thank you so much. I know we've missed some questions, but I think we're going to get you back because that was, you know, we've dealt with the detail. We got the investment predictions there. Been a great hour and an intense hour. So thank you so much for all.
No, it's a pleasure. You can field questions. You can drop an email if you want. If anyone wants to engage, we're happy to have a chat on the sidelines or in a subsequent webinar.
Absolutely.
Whatever works for you guys.
We'd love to have you back and have you on the radio show. We had fun yesterday morning. So let's get you back talking about the C word, maybe, which some people thought you were going to mention, cryptocurrency.
Oh.
We're not going to open that can of worms right now. There's already a big conversation. People might hang around after you've gone.
Yeah. You know, crypto is like Marmite. Yeah. You either like it or you loathe it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Some people love it thick on their toast in the morning. Others just can't wait to leave it behind in the old country.
Exactly.
So, Paul, thank you so much. And
cheers, mate.
Keep in touch with Paul there.
Thank you.
Management in our business directory at expatsportugal.com. Take care. Bye for now.
God bless. Thank you. Take care. Cheers.